My sister-in-law tried to sabotage my daughter's graduation out of spite. I ensured her own secrets became the keynote speech. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the trash can. Inside, my daughter Maya's graduation gown was shredded into tiny, jagged ribbons. It wasn't just torn, it had been destroyed with fabric shears. Maya was standing behind me, her face red and wet with tears. This was the dress she had saved for, the one we had spent weeks fitting perfectly for her big day. Suddenly, the back door opened. My sister-in-law, Brenda, walked in holding a steaming cup of expensive coffee. She didn't look shocked. She didn't look sad. She leaned against the counter and took a slow sip, looking down at the ruined fabric in the bin. "Oh dear, what a mess," she said with a fake, high-pitched sigh. "I guess some people just aren't meant to have a perfect day, Belinda. Maybe it's a sign." I looked at her wrist. A tiny silver thread from the gown was caught in her watch. My blood turned to ice, but I didn't scream. I didn't even move. If I attacked her now, I would look like the crazy one, and Brenda always made sure she looked like the saint. She was the head of the PTA and a big deal at the local church. Everyone in town thought she was a perfect lady. She was even the guest keynote speaker for the graduation ceremony because she was a distinguished alumna. For years, she had looked down on me and Maya. She called us commoners and told everyone Maya was just an average girl who got lucky. Her own son, Leo, was her pride and joy. She talked about his genius every chance she got. As she stood there smirking, I realized the thread on her watch was proof. She had done this. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to think. I waited until Brenda went to the living room to brag to my brother about her speech. I slipped into the guest room where she was staying. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I began to search her suitcase, moving things carefully so she wouldn't notice. Deep under her silk blouses, I felt something cold and heavy. I pulled them out. There they were, my professional fabric shears, still dusty with the white threads from Maya's gown. My hands shook with rage. Why would a grown woman do this to a teenager? Then I remembered. Maya had just received her acceptance letter to an Ivy League university. Leo, the genius, had been rejected from that same school only a week ago. Brenda couldn't handle the fact that my daughter was outshining her son. She wanted to break Maya's spirit before she could even walk across that stage. I heard Brenda laughing in the other room. "Maya is just so emotional," she was saying to my brother. "Maybe she's not ready for a big university if she can't handle a little dress trouble." I tucked the shears back into the suitcase. I needed to be smart. I went to find Maya and told her to wash her face. I told her we would find a way, but I knew time was running out. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from the school principal's office. They wanted to see us immediately. My stomach dropped. When we arrived at the school, the registrar looked at us with a very cold expression. She told me an anonymous tip had come in. Someone claimed Maya had cheated on her final exams. Her diploma was being withheld until they could investigate. The ceremony started in only 1 hour. Maya looked like she was going to faint. The registrar showed me the evidence. It was a series of printed emails sent from Maya's student account to a teacher, offering money for test answers. They looked real, but I knew my daughter. Maya would never do something like that. She studied until 3 in the morning every night. As I looked at the timestamps on the emails, I realized they were sent during the time Maya was at work at the library. I looked out the window and saw Brenda's car in the parking lot. She was already here, probably checking to make sure her plan was working. She didn't just want to ruin a dress, she wanted to ruin Maya's entire future. She wanted Leo to be the only star on that stage. If you want to see how I save my daughter's future and take down the saint, hit subscribe for more revenge stories. I took a deep breath and led Maya out of the office. The registrar told us Maya couldn't sit with the graduates until the truth was found. Brenda didn't know that I wasn't just a mother who baked cookies. I was a senior cybersecurity analyst for a major firm. I knew how digital footprints worked better than I knew my own kitchen. I told Maya to wait in the car and keep her head up. I didn't go back to the principal to beg. Instead, I went to the school's server room. The technician there knew me because I had helped them fix a major data breach the year before. I told him I needed to verify a login for my daughter's security. He moved aside and let me work. My fingers flew across the keyboard. Within minutes, I found the truth. The forged emails were sent from a device using Brenda's home IP address. My eyes narrowed as I dug deeper into the logs. While I was already inside the network, I decided to look at the scholarship files. I found a hidden folder on the shared drive that shouldn't have been there. It was labeled LEO, Donations. My heart skipped a beat as I clicked it open. Inside were scanned copies of checks and wire transfer receipts. Brenna hadn't just been bullying us, she had been a criminal. The folder contained proof that she had paid a professional proxy service to take Leo's online exams for the last 3 years. Leo wasn't a genius. He was a fraud who couldn't even pass basic algebra on his own. Every A he had earned was bought and paid for by Brenda. I also found a receipt for a $500 payment to the anonymous tipster who had reported Maya for cheating. I felt a surge of white-hot anger, but I forced myself to stay calm. I copied every single file onto an encrypted thumb drive. Just as I was finished, I saw Brenda walking down the hallway. She looked like a queen, wearing a bright yellow suit and a wide, fake smile. She saw me and walked over, holding a bag from a cheap discount store. "Oh, Belinda, I heard the terrible news about the cheating scandal," she said, her voice dripping with fake pity. "It's so tragic. But look, I bought Maya this polyester dress from the clearance rack. She can wear it while she sits in the audience and watches Leo graduate. At least she won't be totally embarrassed." She held up the ugly, thin dress like it was a prize. I looked at her and smiled. "Keep the dress, Brenda. You're going to need it for the reception I'm planning." Brenda's smile flickered for a second, but she just laughed and walked toward the stage. She thought she had won. She thought I was just a sad, defeated mother. I went back to the car and told Maya that everything was going to be okay. I didn't tell her the whole plan yet. I needed her to trust me. I spent the next 45 minutes in the back of the car with my laptop and a sewing kit. I didn't just fix the shredded gown, I redesigned it. I used the ribbons to create a bold, modern pattern that looked like high-end art. It was better and stronger than the original. In the lining, I sewed a tiny pocket for the thumb drive. Then, I used my laptop to remotely access the school's presentation system. I found Brenda's Keynote speech file. I didn't delete it. I simply improved it. The graduation ceremony began, and the stadium was packed with families. The air was hot and smelled of grass and hairspray. Brenda was sitting in the very front row, right next to the principal. She was clutching her Distinguished Alumna Award and looking back at the crowd with a smug expression. She spotted me in the middle of the bleachers and mouthed the words, "Too bad." She looked so proud, thinking my daughter was hidden away in shame. But Maya was sitting in the very back row of the student section, just like I told her. She was wearing the redesigned gown under a long coat, waiting for my signal. My hand was steady as I held my phone, ready to trigger the first phase of Brenda's downfall. If you want to see the moment the saint finally gets unmasked, hit subscribe for more revenge stories. The principal stepped up to the microphone, his voice booming through the speakers. He spent 5 minutes talking about character and the high standards of our community. Then, he introduced Brenda. He called her a woman of integrity and a pillar of the town. Brenda stood up, smoothing her yellow suit, and walked to the podium with her head held high. The spotlight hit her, making her look like a goddess of success. She looked out at the hundreds of parents and students with a look of pure triumph. She opened her mouth to begin her speech about how honesty and hard work were the only paths to the top. I sat in the bleachers, my thumb hovering over the play button on my phone. The stadium went quiet, waiting for her inspiring words. I looked at Maya in the back row. This was for every tear she had shed this morning. Brenda began speaking in a soft, practiced voice. She talked about her own time at the school and how she had never taken a shortcut. 5 minutes into her speech, she signaled for the slideshow to begin. She expected to see photos of her son Leo winning awards and her own volunteer work. Instead, the giant screen behind her flickered and turned bright white. The audience started to murmur as the first image appeared. It wasn't a photo of a trophy. It was a high-resolution picture of the shredded white gown sitting in the trash can. Right next to it was a zoomed-in shot of the fabric shears I had found in Brenda's suitcase. Brenda didn't see the screen at first. She kept talking about the importance of kindness. She didn't realize that the entire audience was staring at the evidence of her cruelty with their mouths open. The murmurs grew into a loud buzz of confusion. Brenda finally turned around to see what everyone was looking at. Her face turned a ghostly, sickly white. Before she could say a word, the audio on her microphone cut out. Suddenly, a new sound filled the stadium. It was the recording I had pulled from her own home security system. Her voice echoed over the speakers, clear and sharp. "She won't walk, the records will be corrected," the recording played. The stadium went dead silent. Everyone heard her cold voice planning to destroy my daughter's hard work. Brenda grabbed the edges of the podium, her knuckles turning white. She looked like she wanted to run, but she was frozen in the spotlight. I watched from the bleachers, feeling a cold sense of justice. The saint was finally starting to crumble in front of the whole town. The screen flickered again. This time, a spreadsheet appeared. It was the LEO donations folder I had found on the school server. The giant letters showed the $50,000 wire transfers Brenda had made to the proxy testing service. It showed the exact dates and the names of the people who had taken Leo's SATs for him. The parents in the audience started to gasp and point. People who had always felt inferior to Brenda were now seeing the truth. Leo, who was sitting on the stage with the other honor students, put his head in his hands. He looked like he wanted the earth to swallow him whole. Brenda tried to shout over the recording, but her mic was still dead. She was just a woman in a yellow suit, screaming at a crowd that now knew she was a complete and total fraud. The final slide was the most damaging. It showed the IP address logs linking the cheating tip directly to Brenda's personal laptop. It proved she was the anonymous person who had tried to get Maya disqualified. I stood up from my seat and walked down the bleachers. I had a wireless mic in my hand that the technician had given me. I walked right onto the stage and stood a few feet away from her. The crowd was leaning forward in their seats. "I think you skipped the part of your speech about integrity, Brenda," I said. My voice was calm and steady. Brenda looked at me with eyes full of pure hatred, but she couldn't speak. She was trapped by her own secrets. If you want to see how the principal and the police react to this unmasking, hit subscribe for more revenge stories. The principal rushed toward me, his face a bright shade of purple. He tried to grab the microphone from my hand, but I stepped back. He looked terrified, and I knew why. I signaled the technician one last time. The screen changed to show a photograph of a legal document and a picture of a brand new, luxury SUV. The text on the screen showed a gift transfer from Brenda's husband to the principal's private account just last month. The audience erupted into shouts of anger. The Board of Education members in the front row stood up, their faces tight with fury. They weren't just looking at Brenda now, they were looking at the man who had helped her hide the truth. The principal stopped moving and stared at the screen, realized his career was ending in front of the entire town. I looked at Brenda, who was shaking with rage. I didn't waste another second on the principal. I turned toward the back of the stadium and called Maya's name into the microphone. "Maya, come claim what is yours," I said. The crowd turned as Maya stood up. She unbuttoned her long coat and let it fall to the floor. She walked down the center aisle in her redesigned gown. The white fabric glowed in the sun, and the bold ribbon patterns looked like a suit of armor. The students began to clap, and soon the entire crowd was giving her a standing ovation. As she reached the stage, I reached into my bag. I had taken her real diploma from the principal's desk while the technician was helping me earlier. I handed it to her right there in front of everyone. Maya gripped the paper, her eyes shining with tears of joy and pride. Brenda finally snapped. The silence of her shock turned into a wild, screaming meltdown. "This is all fake. She's a liar," Brenda shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. She lunged across the stage, trying to reach the laptop that was feeding the images to the big screen. In her high heels and her panic, she didn't see the thick microphone cord stretched across the floor. Her foot caught the wire, and she went flying forward. She landed face first in the massive arrangement of graduation hydrangeas at the edge of the stage. The distinguished alumna was currently upside down, her expensive yellow suit covered in dirt and crushed blue flowers. The crowd didn't rush to help her. They just watched as the woman who had mocked everyone for being average struggled to crawl out of the bushes. It was a pathetic sight. The noise of the crowd suddenly changed as two police officers walked up the side stairs of the stage. Because Brenda's exam fraud involved interstate wire transfers and the forgery of school documents, they had been alerted by the evidence I leaked to the authorities earlier that morning. They didn't wait for her to fix her hair or brush the dirt off her suit. They pulled her out of the flower bed and stood her up. The stadium fell silent again as the metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the speakers. Brenda was led down the stage steps in her distinguished robes, her wrists bound behind her back. She looked at the parents she had judged for years, but no one would meet her eyes. The saint was being taken away in the back of a squad car, and the justice felt sweet. As Brenda was being led away, Leo stood up from his seat on the stage. He looked at his mother, then at the crowd, and finally at Maya. He seemed tired, like a heavy weight had finally been lifted off his shoulders. He walked to the microphone, his voice cracking. "She made me do it," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I never wanted to lie. I'm not a genius, and I'm sorry." He took off his honor cords and dropped them on the floor. He walked off the stage alone, leaving his mother's lies behind him for good. The ceremony was a disaster for the school, but a victory for the truth. If you want to see how the school board cleans house and how Maya's future gets even brighter, hit subscribe for more revenge stories. The ceremony ended in a roar of conversation that didn't stop for hours. We didn't stay to talk to the disgraced school officials. We went home and hosted the graduation party that Brenda had tried so hard to sabotage. I thought it would be a small affair, but I was wrong. Almost the entire graduating class showed up at our house. They were disgusted by the corruption and moved by Maya's strength. Our backyard was filled with laughter and the smell of the barbecue my brother was manning with a guilty expression. Amidst the celebration, my phone chimed. It was an email from the dean of the Ivy League university Maya was set to attend. They had seen the viral video of the ceremony. The dean wrote that they admired Maya's resilience and that her academic scholarship was officially being doubled to cover all her expenses. By Monday morning, the town was a different place. The school board held an emergency meeting and fired the principal before the sun was even fully up. A full audit was launched into the school's records, and it didn't take long for more filth to surface. It turned out Brenda had been donating to fix grades for years, not just for Leo, but for several other children of the town's elite families. The scandal was like a wildfire, burning through the reputations of the people who used to look down on us. Half the important families in town were suddenly under investigation for fraud and bribery. The registrar who had threatened Maya was also suspended. The commoners they had mocked were now the only ones with clean hands. I watched the news reports with a calm heart, knowing the real work was just beginning. The legal fallout for Brenda was devastating. My brother, finally seeing the monster he had been married to, didn't hesitate. He filed for divorce and worked with the bank to freeze all their joint accounts. He realized that Brenda had been draining their savings to pay for Leo's fake life and to bribe school officials. Without access to the family money, Brenda's life of luxury vanished in an instant. She tried to hire the most expensive lawyers in the state, but they wouldn't take her case without a massive retainer up front. She was forced to accept a public defender, the very commoner route she had spent her whole life mocking. She sat in a cold cell, waiting for a trial that she knew she couldn't win. The silk blouses and expensive coffee were gone, replaced by gray walls and plastic trays. Brenda was eventually released on bail, but she had nowhere to go. She was officially kicked out of the PTA, the church, and the country club. She tried to go to the local grocery store once, keeping her head down. But the town didn't forget. People moved their carts away from her as if she were contagious. The local gossip groups, which she used to lead, were now filled with nothing but her own secrets. She was the keynote of every conversation, but not for the reasons she wanted. She had become a social pariah in the town she once ruled. Every time she stepped outside, she felt the weight of 1,000 judgmental eyes. She had built her life on being better than everyone else, and now she was the bottom of the barrel. To pay for her mounting legal fees and the massive fines for exam fraud, Brenda was forced to put her dream mansion on the market. It was a cold, grand house that she had used to intimidate me for years. I saw the listing and didn't hesitate. I used my own savings and a portion of my latest bonus to put in an all-cash bid through a blind trust. The sale went through quickly because she was desperate. On the day she moved out, I pulled up to the curb. I watched her carrying her own boxes, looking tired and small. I didn't say a word as I walked up and unlocked the front door. I told her right then that I wasn't going to live there. I was turning the mansion into a low-cost tutoring center for hardworking students. A few weeks later, Brenda tried one last desperate move. She showed up at our local church during a Sunday service, sobbing and begging for a chance to make a public confession. She wanted to gain sympathy from the congregation she had once led. I sat in the back row, watching her walk toward the altar with fake humility. Just as she started to speak about mistakes, I stood up. I walked down the center aisle, carrying the bundle of rags that used to be Maya's graduation gown. The church went silent as I reached the front. I didn't say a word. I simply draped the shredded white fabric over her shoulders like a heavy, tattered shawl. Forgiveness requires restitution, Brenda, I whispered loudly enough for the front pews to hear. She looked down at the ribbons of fabric and stopped talking. The pastor cleared his throat and asked her to step down. While Brenda was drowning in her own choices, I focused on Leo. He was a victim of his mother's obsession with status, and he was lost. I sat him down and talked to him like a human being for the first time in years. I helped him research vocational schools, and he admitted he had always loved working with his hands, not books. I helped him enroll in a top-tier mechanical engineering program that focused on hands-on repairs. He became a master mechanic within a year and officially cut all ties with his mother. On the next Mother's Day, my doorbell rang. It was a delivery for me. It was a card from Leo, thanking me for saving his life from his mother's lies. He called me the mother he wished he had always had. I put the card on my mantle, knowing Brenda would never see one. The criminal charges were just the beginning of Brenda's nightmare. I hired a powerful civil attorney and filed a massive lawsuit against her. I sued her for intentional infliction of emotional distress and defamation of a minor. I presented the evidence of the shredded gown, the forged emails, and the psychological impact on Maya. The trial lasted 2 weeks, and Brenda looked more haggard every single day. She tried to lie on the stand, but my lawyer used the digital logs I had found to trap her in every single sentence. The jury didn't even need an hour to deliberate. They awarded Maya $1 million in damages, plus the cost of the original gown. Brenda gasped as the verdict was read, realizing she would be in debt for the rest of her life. She looked at me, and I simply nodded. 6 months later, the once mighty Brenda was seen working at a fast food drive-thru on the edge of town. It was the only place that would hire a convicted fraudster with no references. She had to wear a greasy visor and a polyester uniform that was 3 sizes too big. One afternoon, I decided it was time for a visit. I pulled into the drive-thru lane in the luxury car that Brenda used to mock me for not being able to afford. Maya was behind the wheel, looking radiant and confident. We pulled up to the window, and Brenda's face turned a deep, shameful red as she recognized us. She had to lean out the window to take our order, her hands shaking as she held the headset. She looked like a shadow of the woman who used to walk the halls of a school like she owned them. Maya looked Brenda straight in the eyes and ordered a humble pie with a calm smile. Brenda had to stand there and serve us, forced to be polite because her manager was watching. She handed over our drinks, her eyes watering with suppressed rage and embarrassment. When it came time to pay, Maya pulled out a single dollar bill. She handed it to Brenda and said, "Keep the change. You clearly need it more than I need an upgrade to my life." We pulled away, leaving Brenda standing at the window with a look of absolute defeat. She was finally experiencing the commoner life she had looked down on for so long. If you want to see the final audit that sends Brenda away for good, hit subscribe for more revenge stories. The drive-thru humiliation was only the start of her final collapse. Because of the donations I had uncovered in the school's digital files, the IRS launched a massive investigation into Brenda's past finances. They discovered that she had been funneling money through fake charities to hide her bribes and avoid paying her fair share. The paper trail was a mile long, and Brenda wasn't smart enough to cover it. She was charged with multiple counts of tax evasion and money laundering. Her 5-year saint streak was officially over, replaced by a judge's hammer. She was sentenced to 5 years in a state prison. On the day she was processed, there were no cameras or news crews. She was just another number in an orange jumpsuit. She had tried to steal my daughter's future, but in the end, she had successfully traded her own mansion for a tiny, cold cell. A few weeks before Maya left for her first semester at the university, I decided to visit Brenda one last time. I wanted her to see the face of the woman she thought she could break. I sat behind the thick glass partition in the prison visiting room. Brenda was led in by a guard, her skin sallow and her hair graying. She wasn't wearing silk or pearls, she was wearing rough orange fabric. I didn't pick up the phone at first. I just held up a photo of Maya standing in front of the Ivy League gates on her first day. Maya looked beautiful, happy, and free. Brenda stared at the photo, her lips trembling. I finally picked up the receiver and looked her in the eye. "She did it without your permission, and she did it without your shears, Brenda," I said quietly. Brenda didn't say a word. She just put her head down and wept. The scandal was so big that a local investigative journalist decided to write a book about the whole ordeal. He titled it The Keynote Lie, The Rise and Fall of a Suburban Saint. I agreed to an interview, but only to ensure the focus stayed on the importance of standing up to bullies. The book became a regional bestseller almost overnight. The cover featured a picture of the school podium with the word fraud stamped across it in bold red letters. Everywhere Brenda went in the prison library, she saw her own face on the cover of the books the other inmates were reading. She couldn't escape the truth she had tried to bury. Her name became synonymous with betrayal and greed. She had wanted to be a distinguished alumna forever, and now she was, just not in the way she had planned for herself and her son. My brother came to see me at the tutoring center a few months after the sentencing. He looked older, but his eyes were clearer than they had been in years. He sat in one of the small chairs and apologized for being blind to Brenda's cruelty for so long. He admitted he knew she was difficult and ambitious, but he didn't want to rock the boat. I looked at him and didn't offer an easy comfort. The boat didn't rock, Julian. It sank. And you stood on the shore and let your niece drown while you watched the waves, I told him. He flinched, but he didn't argue. He knew he had to earn his way back into our lives through actions, not just words. He started volunteering at the center, helping kids with their math homework, finally trying to be the man he should have been. Maya decided to take the $1 million settlement money and do something meaningful with it. She founded the Gown Fund, a nonprofit organization dedicated to buying graduation dresses and suits for students from low-income families. She didn't want any girl to feel the way she felt on that morning in the kitchen. For the grand opening gala, we invited all the families that Brenda had once labeled as average or unimportant. We filled the room with music, laughter, and beautiful clothes. Maya stood on the stage, looking like a leader, and talked about how a shredded dream can be woven into something much stronger. I watched her from the front row, my heart nearly bursting with pride. My daughter wasn't just a survivor, she was a champion. If you want to see the final closure and where we are now, hit subscribe for more revenge stories. I kept one small, jagged piece of the original shredded gown. I didn't hide it away in a box of bad memories. Instead, I had it professionally framed and hung it right in the center of my home office. It was a small strip of white silk with a raw, frayed edge. Every morning when I sat down to work, I looked at it. It didn't make me feel sad anymore, it made me feel powerful. It was a constant reminder that beauty and success can be rebuilt even when someone tries to cut your life into pieces out of pure spite. It reminded me that Brenda's hate was no match for my love and my intelligence. One afternoon, a letter arrived from the prison. It was from Brenda, and her handwriting was shaky and messy. She was asking me for money to buy snacks and extra blankets. She claimed she was family and deserved my help. I sat at my desk and looked at her letter for a long time. She still didn't get it. She still thought she could manipulate me after everything she had done. I didn't write back with a long list of her sins. I didn't scream at the paper. I simply walked over to my bookshelf and pulled out a copy of Maya's college honors thesis. Maya had written a brilliant paper on the psychology of envy and its impact on community dynamics. I placed the thick document into a large envelope and mailed it to Brenda's cell. I didn't send a single cent. I didn't send a card. I wanted her to spend her long, cold nights reading about exactly why she had failed as a human being. I wanted her to see that Maya was now an expert on the very darkness that Brenda had tried to use as a weapon. 4 years passed by in a blur of growth and peace. The day finally came for Maya's college graduation from the Ivy League. This time, there was no drama, no shredded fabric, and no secret recordings. The sun was shining on the university green as Maya walked across the stage to receive her degree in psychology and law. She graduated at the very top of her class, receiving the highest honors possible. As she held her diploma high, I looked into the audience and saw a familiar face. Leo was sitting in the third row, wearing a clean work uniform and cheering louder than anyone else. He had become a successful business owner himself, running a high-end auto shop. He looked at Maya like a real brother should, with pure joy and zero jealousy. He had finally found his own path away from his mother's shadow. After the ceremony, we drove past Brenda's old mansion on the way to dinner. The building was glowing with light. I could see the silhouettes of children through the windows, sitting at tables and learning. It was no longer a cold monument to one woman's ego, it was a place of hope and hard work. I realized then that my revenge wasn't actually the goal. The goal was justice. Revenge is about hurting someone, but justice is about fixing what was broken and making the world a little bit better. I saw a news report on my phone that evening. Brenda had been released from prison on parole, but she had absolutely nowhere to go. No one in town would offer her a bed, and her own son had changed his phone number. She was a ghost in a world that had moved on without her. I stood on the balcony of our home, looking at the stars. Brenda had tried to cut my daughter's future into 1,000 pieces, but she was too foolish to realize something important. When you shred a gown, you don't destroy the thread, you just make it easier to weave a much stronger one. We had taken the rags of her spite and turned them into a life that was beautiful, honest, and full of meaning. Maya was moving to the city to start her career in civil rights law, and I was finally at peace. The best keynote speech in the world isn't spoken from a podium at a high school, it is lived every single day through your actions. Our lives were now a masterpiece of truth, and Brenda was just a faded, distant shadow who couldn't touch us ever again. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe for more.